Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to Unbearable 73. In this episode, we're about to view something that's pretty much unbearable, or at least a representation of that, which is the Rings of Prime trailer from the San Diego Comic Con. So as we head towards the inevitable premiere date of Amazoff Rings of Prime, which is set to dishonor the memory, the literary legacy, and the very friggin' day of J.R.R. Tolkien's death, which is September 2nd, 1973, Amazoff finally released a fuller-length trailer for this crap that they're producing. Okay, so we got this teaser at Comic-Con, like I said. It's a teaser in the same sense that Mike Tyson's first jab that rocked his opponent's skulls was a teaser of their impending brain damage. Maybe it's similar to the teaser the dinosaurs looked up in the sky one day and they saw this like glowing orb heading down to the ground, and in their dinosaur brains they were like, huh? And then they were dead. Maybe that type of freaking teaser. Let's get right into this. I don't plan hearing everything in this trailer, but these are the kind of the most important things that I, sort of commented that needed to be addressed. Okay, and I watched it 3 or 4 times and said, okay, if I touched upon every single thing in this video, I'd be here for 4 bloody hours. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to hopefully keep this to either one 20-minute thing or maybe 2 15 or 10 or 12-minute parts. So we'll see. So it's leaked that this thing that opens with a long series of flashbacks by Galadriel to the events of the First Age. Don't know that for sure, but I've heard multiple people who I trust say it's like 7 minutes of her commenting and flashing back to events of the First Age. I don't know. Now, if Amazon had the rights to distort more of Tolkien's work, they might be able to make these flashbacks both accurate and relevant, but they don't. Not that I think they would if they did, but Amazon basically does not have any direct rights to most of the depictions of Galadriel's actions or mannerisms. This, in fact, is all they have licensed. Aside from the history of Middle-earth and a couple of other books, the main text that Tolkien and his son Christopher created that have material related to Tolkien's Legendarium are in this picture. Okay, the only thing that Amazon has a license to adapt from is that tiny bit which I pinched between 2 fingers. Those are the appendices to the Lord of the Rings. Now, it goes without saying, however, they had to actually try to adapt his material and not create their own fan fiction. They actually have material in that little bit for dozens of shows and movies with some particularly cool focuses, like the actual war between men and elves, which occurred in that age, the actual making of the rings as they were depicted, the fall of Numenor, all sorts of stuff in there. Okay? Now, for example, Appendix B of the appendices opens with this bit here. The First Age ended with the great battle in which the hosts of Valinor broke Thangodorim and overthrew Morgoth. Then most of the Noldor returned into the far west and dwelt in Erysia within sight of Valinor, and many of the Sindar went over the sea also. Now, it should be pointed out briefly that The Lord of the Rings was published in the late 50s, and Tolkien continued to work on and refine the materials that are wound up in the Silmarillion, which were published somewhat posthumously, with a little more refinement by Christopher Tolkien and Gary L.K. So the version of events that eventually see in the Silmarillion, there are some differences, but the primary canon is The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and then right below that is the published Silmarillion, okay? And then there's other materials at like the 3rd and 4th level, okay? So I think many of those images we see of events that people who died in the First Age or a battle, which can only be the War of Wrath. It's the only thing that happened like that on that Galadriel would have possibly seen, which would have had that level of destruction, okay? The rest of the wars were mostly ground battles with occasional fights against Balrogs and things like that. And there was an awesome duel between Fingon or Finarfin, one I forget offhand. My brain's just not remembering it right now. And Morgoth. It was an awesome. I wish they could. I would like to see that turned into a movie. Okay. Anyway, they don't have access to events that occurred in the First Age, except those that are indirectly referenced in the appendices. And those things in the appendices are timelines, some commentaries about the various races and species and things like that. Okay. So this allows Amazon to basically make anything up, so long as far as you know, it doesn't directly conflict with anything else in the Lord of the Rings of the Hobbit. Okay, so now let's take a look at a bit of this trailer. And I have it muted with subtitles should be playing. I'll make sure so you guys can see what we're talking about. Let's watch a little bit of it. Okay, so obviously someone's talking about this stuff, right? So what point do I want to make here? Galadriel is, at least in canon, at least 2,000 years old in human years before the Second Age even begins, okay? The timeline in the First Age is a little wonky, obviously, because Tolkien never finalized for particular reasons. There are chunks of ages, and some of those ages in the First Age are in what are called Valiant years, which each Valiant year is like 9.2 human years and so on and so forth, okay? But so before the First Age even ends, I mean, the Second Age even begins, she's at least 2,000 human years old, okay? She's an experienced, has trained in like everything the Noldor nobles could train in, and so on and so forth, okay? Now, yet they portray Galadriel in this show, from all the clips we've seen, as acting inexperienced, immature, and very headstrong, which is not how Galadriel is characterized at all. And you'll keep hearing return to these points. That pile of helms, why would the Noldor do that? Like that's at least 15 feet tall and equally as rounded. Every indication from the text, which Amazoff does not have, I suppose answered the question, but anyway, every indication is that the elves buried their dead or entombed them. Also, look how high that pile is. I mean, if she used her actual powers, sure, Galadriel can make a pile of helms, but this show seems to be not giving her actual powers, so to speak. Okay, I could comment that those helmets do not look like Noldor elf armor, but again, the answer is the same thing. They don't have the rights to it, so that's probably why they're stealing how the movie Gladiator depicted Romans, and that's how they're depicting the Roman elves, the Noldor elves looking in this show. Right? Now, we see the scene of Galadriel. Okay, so we see a couple scenes in here. Let's watch a little more. Okay, so here. So let's stop right at the end of this. So that's like a Roman laurel wreath, and that's a different culture than Germanic origin would be. Anyway, so we see a scene of Gil-galad crowning Galadriel, and all those elves have their golden laurel wreath crowns. There's nothing to crown Galadriel for. She was already a member of the Noldor nobility due to her heritage. She's also a member of the Vanyar nobility. She's literally the granddaughter of two different kings of the elves. Okay? The voiceover indicates that the scene is supposed to be right at the end of the First Age. Galadriel is already a high-ranking noble who, and her husband, Celebrimbor, was a ruler. Well, at the time he might have been a prince, but he eventually became the ruler of a group of Sindar elves. So she co-ruled that. She was like his queen for him, and he was the king, and she was his co-regent for the area she ruled under the Noldor elves. Galadriel, at the time of the end of the First Age, in the canon, had accepted the order of Ianwi, the herald of Manwë, that the Noldor should return to Valinor. But then she changed her mind because she wished to remain with her husband Celeborn, where they lived in Lindon. Lindon was the region that was ruled by Gil-galad, as Gil-galad is the fourth High King of the Elves. Okay, anyway. Celeborn ruled the fief of Har-Lindon under the High King of the Elves, Gil-galad. Celeborn was a Sindarin elf. Galadriel also wished to explore Middle-earth before she returned. So she wanted to remain with her husband and explore Middle-earth. That's why she didn't go back, even though she accepted that she should. Note, however, that most, as in 95% of what Galadriel and Celeborn did during the Second Age, is in the Unfinished Tales. Amazoff doesn't have any rights to that, which is sad. Well, it's good in a way because they wouldn't destroy it, but sad because there's some amazing stuff in there. Also, Unfinished Tales are, well, unfinished and are not part of the primary canon, which would be The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and sort of the secondary primary canon, which is the Silmarillion, the published version of it, okay? because we have to stop these debates. You take you take the published versions of the books, the latest ones Tolkien made before revisions Tolkien orchestra made before they passed, and have them as your primary canon, like your primary A and B canon, and we use those to have any debates, and anything else is supplemental to bolster an argument. My understanding of what Amazon license entails is that they cannot conflict with events in the primary canon, which are the events in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Okay, don't know where it stands with the Silmarillion. Okay, this is probably why Celebrimbor is either going to be non-existent or implied dead in this crap show, because they did separate for a time, for several hundred years, right around when some of these events were being portrayed in the show during the Second Age. The timeline in the appendices, however, does not go into great detail regarding all the events in that regard. Okay. A lot of that's in the unfinished tales. So let's move forward. We also see these very cheap-looking green outfits that Elrond and one of the two others have on. They look like that material that they make motel curtains out of. Now, this is more of an aesthetic thing in terms of the look, but I'm referring to the material and the visual, the material and the visual quality of them. Not so much like the style, like what the stitching was or whatever, but just the basically. What Elrond is wearing in Rings of Prime looks shabby, whereas what Elrond is wearing, even of similar coloration in some regards, at least for the overshirt, it looks more well tailored. And Elrond is an elven noble; he should be wearing well tailored gear. Yes, there were sort of poor people elves, like who wore more common clothing and stuff like that. The elves were just as diverse in that regard as humans. They weren't all like super rich noble aristocrats. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to end part 1 right here, and I will resume with the next scene, so to speak.